Let's talk about Stuart Broad now. Obviously, 5 for 88 today. And the first time he's bowled with a red ball in the Ashes series so far. And we've seen a lot of him talking to the press and a lot of quotes from him over the last couple of weeks, talking about how gutted he was to be missing out on a couple of matches in this series. He is very good at backing up his words, isn't he?
He is, yeah, but there is a flip side to that in that he's backing up his words because he's doing so when he's out of the team. Now, what we've seen over the last couple of years is that Stuart Broad has become easier to drop, which is a reflection on perhaps waning skill, but really it's a reflection on the way the England management see it, that no longer do they want to persist with Broad and Anderson together, that there is a hierarchy there for the senior bowler spot, if we can call it that. And right now, Stuart Broad is James Anderson's understudy, especially overseas. Now, there was a huge mistake not playing at Brisbane, not least because his record at Brisbane is impeccable. But it was, if you'd say to any England fan before the series had got underway that Stuart Broad, in the first 3 tests where the Ashes would be live, Stuart Broad would only play one of them, and it wouldn't be Brisbane, and it will be the pink ball test, you'd think they've got it completely wrong. Now, in hindsight, we can say that. I don't think it would have changed too much if Broad was playing all 3 of those. In fact, Stuart Broad has just said, a few moments ago that it doesn't matter what bowlers you pick. If your batsmen get bowled out for 140, you're not winning many games. But certainly it feels like we're at a juncture in his career, near the end, naturally, because he's 35, but a juncture where he has probably never been more disgruntled than he is right now. And England seem to be wanting to move that little bit further away from him. And no doubt it will come to a head to a point. Certainly, he's got columns in newspapers. He gives very good interviews. He's very open, very honest, and therefore very critical, and might soon be critical after this series is over. But it feels like we're in a weird point with Stuart Broad. And I'm not really sure which way it's going to go.
I was just going to say, one thing I've been impressed with, and I wonder if it's the same within the actual group. You never know what's going on, do you, within the changing rooms? But I think with the media, we know he's frustrated, but I think he handles what he says to the media and how he carries himself when he's in front of the cameras, when he's on the pitch. I think he handles it really well. And I'd be really interested to know if that is also the case within the insular environment of the dressing room, if he's quite outspoken, if he challenges people when it's when the selections are made. I think he's the 3rd leading wicket taker now in Australia, and you look back to that first test match in Brisbane, and I always put myself in the position of the opposition. What would they not want? I don't think they would have wanted Stuart Broad coming in to bowl. So if we think that, then only imagine how he must be feeling. But as he says in that interview, it's a challenge of top flight sport, isn't it? How you manage yourself and keep going and keep focused.
You also love to see Pat Cummins waiting for him to get five for but the 100 runs and then calling for declaration.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Just to take that edge off that 5 for 88 or whatever he had at the time.
It's funny what Lydia was saying, though. It's that the opposition don't want Broad to play. And when you go back to that first test, you think about the initial duel that we could have had between Warner and Broad. And that would have been the one that Australian fans were dreading, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely. And I think I just don't understand why they just didn't choose their best team, like their best. Anderson and Broad have had so much success. I think it's Broad's 8th 5 for against Australia. He does well against us, and particularly Warner as well. And as an Australian thing, you want to see the best play the best. And that first test, it just felt, I don't know, just like they were trying to play conditions, and we're going to save him for Adelaide, where the ball's going to swing a bit more, and rather than just playing your best team in order to win, to get off to a flying start against Australia.
I suppose the thing we should say about that first test, because it's easy, with the urn already gone, it's easy to be a bit revisionist about that.
Yeah.
England dropped a hell of a load of chances in that first Australia innings. They batted appallingly. And therefore the team selection looks that little bit more distorted in hindsight. But yeah, it was a bold call to do it. And in his own way, bear in mind, obviously he's a bit fresh. He's only played 1 test so far. But in his own way, he's got a bit of something from this series.
It's so strange having to phase out one of your star players, isn't it? It seems almost backwards because you know how effective they are. But when is the right point to start that process?
Well, I think there's 2 sides to look at it. I think it's the players' side, so Broad side, and also the England team's future. And I think first consideration is, when does Broad want to retire? And I get the impression he doesn't want to retire anytime soon. And then that's actually a more tricky situation to handle, because you've got a player who wants to continue, and you've got arguably a group of England management who are looking towards the future and looking for other options. So that's the hardest type of retirement to manage. You often have players, Ross Taylor, he's saying he's going to retire in the next couple of months. So that's actually much easier to manage. Whereas I think this is much trickier. I guess the good things are Mark Wood is bowling brilliantly. He's bowling as quick as he has in any Test series. And so, yeah, from England's management point of view, that's good. But then the dynamic of Broad and the England management is tough, because you get the impression he just doesn't want to hang up his boots yet.
And he always has the comparisons with Anderson as well. And as long as Anderson goes, you feel like Broad is going to want to keep going as well.
Well, I mean, that's part of it, really, isn't it? Because for someone like Stuart Broad, if you took him out and put him in a team on his own where he was the senior man, there'd be an element of, oh, okay, let him retire in his own time. He will know when the time's right. The issue is that there are two players in that England team who you'd want to give the privilege of choosing when they exit. Yeah. And, I suppose you could look at it throughout Broad's career, and certainly in tandem with Anderson, and he's always had maybe the rougher end. Anderson might pick the end that he wants to bowl from, and Broad goes on the other side. It'd also be a case where Stuart Broad has brought this up before, because people talk about them together. People forget that he's 4 years younger than Anderson, but he's seen as this veteran. People add on a few extra years to him, and now we're in this situation where, right, if you're going to pick a senior man to bowl, Anderson and then Broad. So, yeah, he could. I wouldn't say he's. England fans love Stuart Broad. There's no doubt about that. But I wonder if he has been beginning to doubt that affection in some way.
What would you do in the last Test then for Hobart? Would you play both of them as like a swan song in Australia, or would you play your Ollie Robinson and Mark Wood and go, hey guys, you open the bowling. This is your time to shine?
I mean, it probably depends on if they've got a gauge on what someone like James Anderson is going to do at the end of this series. I think if they knew that maybe he's thinking of retiring, we don't know that. I'm just throwing it out there. If that, we don't know that. We don't know what's happening internally. So I guess unless you have that information as to whether one or both of them are thinking of retiring, if that was the case, then you probably would. But if not, then I think you've still got to try and pick the best combination of bowlers that will go out and win the Test match in Hobart.
Win the Test match in Hobart. Great joke, Lydia.
Great joke.